Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Before we begin, I just want to make a quick note. At the end of this episode, I spend the last 4 minutes walking through the way people work with me and where to find resources, my links, and my courses. If you are a returning listener or are already a client, you can absolutely skip that part. If you're new or trying to figure out what kind of support you need, it's there for you. It's the last 4 minutes. Thank you so much for being here. A lot of times, coercive control becomes really hard to explain. And a lot of times that's also the point of coercive control. And today I want to talk about what that has to do with you and also why you're probably still questioning yourself. Because sometimes the hardest part of relationship abuse isn't living through it, it's trying to explain it to other people and also then to get support from those people. And so you replay conversations and incidents, threats, arguments, financial restrictions, parenting conflicts, all the things and the moments of intimidation that kept happening over and over again. And you line them up in your mind and you try and hand somebody else this picture that you've been living inside of and trying to help them understand why the pattern feels so frightening, destabilizing, exhausting, and just impossible to escape. But instead of seeing what you see, oftentimes I hear responses that focus on the individual incident, such as, I don't think that makes them an abuser. They'll also say things like, maybe it was a misunderstanding. Relationships are complicated. And what this is actually pattern blindness. And it's one of the most least talked about reasons why survivors stay stuck in self-doubt for so long. But when you are unable to get support or even just basic empathy, it feels re-traumatizing. Pattern blindness happens when people evaluate controlling behavior in one moment at a time instead of recognizing the larger system that all those moments create together. It's pretty much the core of my work and what I do. And because coercive control often works through repetition, escalation, unpredictability, contradiction, fear, pressure, instability, accumulated harm over time, no single incident may fully communicate the reality of what you're living through. And that pattern is the point. But for many people, including often the survivor themselves, they unconsciously look for one big enough event that finally proves everything else mattered. And until that happens, each individual incident gets minimized, explained away, or treated as unrelated. And individually, each moment may seem survivable, or maybe even explainable, or not that bad. But together, all of those moments create an environment that changes how safe and how stable and how free and emotionally grounded you feel in your own life. And this is one of the reasons survivors often struggle with self-doubt and self-esteem, because when nobody else seems to see the pattern clearly, it becomes easy to question your own reality. But your nervous system also recognizes the pattern long before other people do. You learn to read the temperature of the room the moment they walk in. You feel the dread before you can name it. Your body probably tightens when a name shows up on your phone, or the way that you may start editing yourself mid-sentence without deciding to, or the way that you're already just being overly sensitive. That is your body keeping a record. And it is a protective mechanism. Coercive control was designed to be hard to see. It's not a series of random bad moments, but it's a system, and one that is deliberately constructed in ways that make it really difficult for the person experiencing it to name and difficult for outsiders to believe. And the behaviors are often deniable on their own if we piece them apart. It can be looked at as a unreasonable expectation here, a guilt trip there, a mood that silences you or stonewalls, financial restrictions that have plausible explanations, or even a parenting conflict that looks on the surface like two adults who just don't get along. No single piece looks like what it really is, and that's the design. When they monitor who you're texting and call it just being concerned or worried, that's control. When your parenting calls or parenting time calls are undermined, that's another one. Each behavior described alone sounds like something a reasonable person might do one time, but what makes it coercive control is that it never actually stops. And it covers every domain of your life. And the cumulative effect of that is that you really start to stop trusting your own judgment. And the harm of coercive control is cumulative. It lives in the atmosphere of your daily life and shows up in the way you learn to manage your tone, your schedule, your friendships, your feelings, your money even. And it's not because you wanted to, but because we were slowly trained to understand that your well-being depended on it. And in my own past relationship, what confused me the most was that, and that I could not point to, was that it wasn't one defining incident. It was a bunch of little ones. And I could point to the pattern, no matter what I changed, no matter how thoughtful I was, no matter how carefully I prepared, the outcome was always the same and the dynamic didn't shift. And that repetition was the evidence that I couldn't name yet when I was in it. I think that the good times make it harder too, because pattern blindness is also complicated by something most people don't talk about. And the good times, they were good enough in your mind that you hold on to them. And in my private podcast, Unhooked, I talk about love bombing and idealization, not just as something happening at the beginning of a relationship, but something that recurs throughout the cycle. And the version of them that was warm and attentive and kind didn't disappear entirely. It kept reappearing just enough to reset your hope and restart that cycle. And the cycle of abuse keeps you stuck not just because it's painful, but because it's confusing. And there are moments of affection that feel like love or seem hopeful, because if it was always bad, it would be easier to leave. But it's not always bad, but it is always cycling. The cycle has a shape. Tension builds, an incident ruptures everything. Then comes reconciliation, an apology, tenderness, or even just kind of getting to the other side. And then it's calm that never actually feels like calm, but it feels like waiting. You never fully feel at ease during the good periods because some part you already know what comes next. There is like an anticipatory dread. And that's not irrational. It's really literally just recognizing the pattern. And this is why outsiders looking at individual moments, even the good ones, can never get the full picture because the good moments are part of the whole system and the whole cycle too. I think that understanding pattern blindness matters for a couple of reasons. And the first is practical. If you're in a custody situation or a legal proceeding or trying to help a therapist, attorney, or family member understand what you've been through, you need to be able to present the pattern, not just the incidents. The pattern is the evidence. The pattern is what tells the truth that no single moment can carry alone. And this matters especially in family court, which is structurally built to evaluate discrete incidents. What happened on this date? What was said in this message? Rather than the system, who the incidents belong to. That mismatch is one of the reasons so many survivors leave custody proceedings feeling more gaslit than when they walked in. It's not that the judge or evaluator failed to care, it's that the framework that they were using is the wrong tool for what we're trying to show them. And when you learn how to document and present the pattern, not just the moments, it's one of the most important things that you can do if you're navigating that process. And then the second reason for understanding pattern blindness is deeper. If you have spent months or years wondering whether you've been overreacting or that you're the problem, or that if the things you said were that bad, it may be because people around you were responding to the individual moments rather than the system you were living inside. Their inability to see the pattern is not confirmation that the pattern doesn't exist, but it actually is evidence of how coercive control conceals itself. And for a long time, I was so stuck in the behavior and so focused on trying to decode every text and understand every blow up and research every personality theory that might explain it. Those things helped because they gave me language and they gave me validation, but it didn't break the cycle. What finally started to shift things was not understanding him better, but it was understanding the cycle well enough to see where I was inside of it at any moment and how I was behaving and what I could do differently, even if it was a really, really, really small change. And then once I could do that, I stopped being surprised by what came next. And once I stopped being surprised, I stopped being controlled by the pattern and the cycle. The pattern had kept me confused for a long time, but it also, beginning to notice it, became the one thing that started to set, me free again. One of the most consistent experiences I hear from clients is that they couldn't leave or couldn't stay gone until they could see this pattern clearly. And it wasn't just enough to remember the bad moments, which is usually something that is offered from people trying to help, but understand how those moments connected and what they served and created inside of them over time. And so if this sounds like something that's really resonating with you, if you need support, I recommend going to look at my course, Unhooked. It's a private podcast for people who are trying to make sense of what happened to them, not just emotionally, but structurally. And the trauma bond doesn't hold because you're weak. It's because you're still operating from inside the system that was built around you. So understanding that cycle is how you begin to see it clearly enough to escape it. Because when you finally see that pattern in full, you stop needing someone else to validate it. And you no longer need a big enough moment or a reason or a time that makes quote unquote sense. You can just give yourself that permission to trust what you already know. And you don't need to explain or over explain or re explain things in ways that are never going to land. You just start trusting yourself instead. And so I really hope that this was helpful. And if you are interested in Unhooked, the link is in my bio in the show notes. If this episode resonated and you're realizing that what you're dealing with isn't just stress or miscommunication, there are ways to get support that don't minimize what you're experiencing. I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes telling you about my offerings because at the core of my business is one-on-one coaching. The podcast is something that I do because I do like being able to help a broader audience, but the truth is that the core of my work is really coaching and providing other offerings so that people can begin to heal. At the center of everything I do is one-on-one coaching. That's where I slow things down, listen closely, and help you make sense of what's happening in your specific situation. It's not a template. It's not just based on theories, but it's really focused on your real life. Some people start with a one-time validation call. That is a single focus session where we look at one specific situation or pattern that you're struggling with. And the goal isn't to fix your life or push you into decisions. It's to help you name what's happening, put it into context of reality, help you notice where you are in it, and offer some feedback and tools to how to navigate it. I also offer an intro call. The intro call used to be called the clarity call, and it's a short call where you can share what's going on for you, and I can explain how I work and whether I'm the right fit for your situation. There's no obligation to continue after that. It's simply a way for us to get on the same page before moving forward. For people who need ongoing support, I offer weekly or biweekly coaching. This is especially helpful if you're navigating emotional abuse, trauma bond, high conflict divorce, or custody and co-parenting with a difficult or controlling person. Ongoing work allows us to track patterns over time, stay anchored when things escalate, and make decisions in a way that protects your nervous system and your long-term stability. All of my coaching options can be found on my websites, emotionalabusecoach.com and highconflictdivorcecoaching.com. Both links are available in the show notes of this episode. In addition to one-on-one coaching, I offer several self-paced courses and programs. They're called Divorcing a Narcissist 101, How to Document for Family Court, the Emotional Abuse Breakthrough Course, Setting Boundaries with a Narcissist, and Unhooked, which is my program and private podcast that walks you through the full cycle of abuse, helps you map it out in your relationship, and shows you how to begin to break free from the trauma bond. I also write on Substack, where I explore topics like trauma bonding, emotional abuse, coercive control, high conflict divorce, and the cluster B dynamics. There's a free option and a paid membership that offers deeper dives, Q&As, and additional resources. Everything that I do and everything that I build is around one core truth and message that you're not crazy, you shouldn't feel crazy, and that even though I can see patterns in what you're experiencing, it doesn't mean that it's normal. It's not healthy. My work is really about helping you understand what's happening and begin to trust yourself again. All of the links that I shared are in my show notes, and I really appreciate you being here.